All right. Well, today, something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue, as they say. Every time we get together, it is a kind of marriage ceremony here, joining of hearts, marriage of hearts. And we'll have an old poem, uh, a new poem that was borrowed from another poem. And then I'm wearing blue. I like to wear blue in this month because it's a month of Mary. Month of Mary. When you saw those pictures, it was a picture of Mary going towards Elizabeth. When she accepted this incredible invitation to birth the divine, even though she had never known a man, as she would say. How could I do this? He said, well, will be done unto you. Just can you go with the program? And she said, yes. One of the first great prayers in our toolbox of prayers. She said, yes. And then the reading of this week, depending on the cycle you're in of the readings, it talks about she left and went to visit her country cousin Elizabeth. Um, so she got out of town for a while. There could have been a lot of reasons for that, but it's a kind of going into seclusion, going into retreat for a while, which is really what we're talking about to try to revive the spirit of Advent. Uh, we're pulling back a little bit from the action. She went into the country for 3 months. When she got there, that picture is lovely. They're going towards each other and they're holding their hands out, and there's a little light in between that they're united by this light. Elizabeth was already 3 months pregnant, and then Mary's going to stay for 3 months, or 6 months pregnant, and then Mary is going to stay for 3 months, probably until the birth, and then she'd go back. She'd go back. Yeah, the baby in Elizabeth's, who became John the Baptist by all accounts, uh, leapt in her womb, sort of moved, you know, at the presence of this his cousin coming. Interesting, it's all symbolic stuff. How we resonate with one another, uh, to the light in one another. Beautiful, beautiful imagery. So, I'm like I said, and for somebody just dropping out of the blue, maybe this is your first time. The imagery today was going to be about what we do every week. It's an encounter every week. Heart to heart is a kind of experiential encounter, and we have three such encounters. We have an encounter with a teaching, the first part, and then we go into contemplative silence. For the rest of the way, for part of it, it's just pure silence, meditation, and then when we come out for the third encounter, we're encountering all that. The teaching goes with us, the deep silence goes with us, but then we have a community meditation where we can unmute and reflect on the teaching, perhaps reflect on the what experientially happened to you during the sitting, and then we can share it with one another. So there's really three different meditations. So if you're able to stay for the whole thing, it's 90 minutes of a kind of rendezvous with the divine, which is nice. Which is nice. It'll. I just think if we're voyaging through this tsunami of capitalism that's taken over Advent and actually got in the way of Christmas, real Christmas, um, moments like this help us on that voyage because we're sailing through it. We're sailing through it, rather than running away from it. We're going through this storm, capitalism. Okay, so the old poem, and it's a great poem. You've heard it before, but it bears reciting over and over again. I remember this poem. This poem's in my heart. I remember this poem though all the time. Yeah. This poem is about 600 years old. So 600 years ago, people were, were dealing with this. It goes like this. You've been invited to meet the friend. No one can resist a divine invitation. So that narrows down all our choices to just two. You can come to God dressed for dancing, or be carried on a stretcher to God's ward. This is a poem by Hafez, 14th century Sufi mystic from what we would now call Iran. Listen to it again, because this is very much the topic of Advent as well. We've been invited to meet a friend. Nobody can resist the divine invitation. We can try, and we do try. Maybe you can pull it off for a year, a decade, a few lifetimes, but in the end, no one can resist the divine invitation, and it is an invitation. Not forcing anything. The divine doesn't force, it invites us onto the dance floor. Nobody can avoid and resist forever a divine invitation. So that narrows down your choices to just two. You can come to God dressed for dancing, or be carried on a stretcher to God's word. Now that ending is really, those are the two choices. And by showing up here today for this divine invitation, you're here dressed for dancing. Can you do this on a regular basis? Can you do it every day? It's great that you're doing it today, but the invitation is out there every day to meet the sacred, to meet the divine. Yeah, and he says, and it's probably most likely, you either come to God dressed for dancing, or you're carried on a stretcher to God's word. That's probably the majority of us have to go through some intense suffering. Certainly anybody who understands the 12 steps knows that's how anybody ends up at a 12-step meeting. Suffered so much, hit bottom, and you realize, I can't manage this. I'm lost. And so that's a very old poem, but I think it's helpful because it's just saying, this is what we're looking for. When I first came up to the monastery with 25 high school guys from Houston, because I got interested in Merton, and one thing led to another. Great grace could bring, the abbot said I could bring these 25 boys up, these cowboys, juniors and seniors, some football players, some artists, some guys from my modern poetry class, 25 guys who never would get together. We came into the monastery here in Gethsemane for a week. Little did I know what that would change. Here I am, for 40 years in Kentucky now. That wasn't part of the plan, but there was an invitation. One thing led to another, and got invited, and I said, "Oh yes, all right." I didn't know what was waiting for us, and we came up. And I remember seeing that time when we went into the old retreat house, there was a limestone kind of lintel over the door that just had two words on it. It said, "God alone." That's the Trappist motto. And pretty much what they mean is you're going to try everything else. And then at some point, when none of it works, you're going to accept the divine invitation, that we can find our happiness, our peace, what this homing device is looking for, finally, in a meeting with the divine. So Hafez was onto that 400 years ago, 600 years ago. Rumi, 100 years before that, and going all the way back to the prophets, the Hindus, Buddhists. Everybody's trying to say, maybe we're uh, looking for love in all the wrong places, as the song says, you see. Just maybe. The first actual word that comes out of Jesus's mouth in the first gospel that was penned that we know of, Gospel of Mark, it was all in Greek. He was writing from northern Israel and writing in Greek to an audience that anybody could read Greek. And first word out of Jesus's mouth was metanoia, and it gets translated as repent, which is sort of churchy, like, oh, be sorry for your sins, but that's not what he really meant. And metanoia really means a number of really interesting things. The primary thing is turn around. Turn around. The way you're going, the way where you're looking for happiness, turn around. I'm about 45 miles south of Louisville, here in the Loose Leaf Hollow. What if I walk south to get to Louisville? It'd be a long trip, about 25,000 miles. You could make it, but the odds aren't good. And so what Jesus was saying is his first words out of his mouth in the first gospel we have, of the four gospels anyway, was turn around. You're going the wrong direction. You're looking for love. And it's going to be a long time. You're not going to find it. You're not going to get to Louisville traveling south from Loose Leaf Hollow. No. So this is about a kind of turnaround. That is the contemplative life kind of turn. We're trying to turn around the energy of this thing that has come to be called Christmas. We're trying to back off from it a little bit, just like Mary backed off, and go into a kind of retreat space for a few months and see what happens. Yeah. So that's an old poem. This new poem I borrowed from some a stanza of a Merton poem, and then sort of reconfigured it and jumped off of it. I do that a lot. I'll read something, and then I'll just it's almost like a dialogue with the original of Merton's, and I just call it the rendezvous. Our French friend Vivian is off at a retreat in the center of France, and she said, I can't be there. I said, well, gee, I sent her the poem already. I said, because we're using a French word here, the rendezvous. Rendezvous in French means an appointed meeting. You make an appointment and you show up. That's a rendezvous. Okay, this is called the rendezvous. And 9 bows to Merton for giving me the images to work with. Make ready for the sacred, who smile like lightning, awakens the song of everlasting healing that now sleeps in your paper flesh like dynamite. Yes, I said yes. I said yes. Make ready for the sacred, whose smile like lightning awakens the song of everlasting healing that now sleeps in your paper flesh like dynamite. Yes, I said yes. I said yes. Yeah. So let's just play with this a little bit, and then it'll get us ready to actually do our silent contemplation. I call it the rendezvous. This meeting with this heart to heart is the image of it. This human heart meets the divine heart for some time, for a moment, even 20 minutes. It's not like meditation standard time or anything, but the essence is there's a meeting here between the human heart and the divine heart. Okay, the sacred heart. Okay, so and all we can do is make ready for it. whatever meditative uh, tradition you're uh, in all the traditions, it just gets you ready for this. It doesn't produce it. It's not like a magic formula. We try to make ourselves ready, and at some point, that's the end of our doing, and then it can be done unto us. Uh, Bill W. in the when he talks in the 11th step, the big book, when he talks about uh, the prayer and meditation help you get closer to the higher power and you build up your strength to do what you need to do in life. He said the essence of meditation is to take away the obstacles between you and this encounter. It's a kind of the Greek Orthodox Christian word for that is kenosis. You don't. Meditation is not adding something that's going to produce something. No, it's a process of dropping the obstructions. So that's why you seek a quiet place and a community of people to do this with, which is it helps us and encourages us. And in a set time, you all showed up. That's the essence of rendezvous. Rendezvous at 11 o'clock Eastern time, and here you are. Okay. But the most we can do is make ready for it. We can't make it happen. It's actually happening all the time. I mean, the Holy One is here all the time. The Holy One shows up. There's nowhere for it to go. It is ultimate reality. So the divine is, waiting. I don't know if it taps its foot or like, where the hell are you for decades, or whatever. I don't know, it's a great mystery too. So we don't know, but the point is we're the one who either we're invited to this rendezvous whenever. It can happen on a walk. It can happen in the gym. It can happen at work. But when you start to develop a practice to where you meet on a regular basis under your control. Everybody's life's different. You have to figure it out. But at least once a day, you have a formal time of thing. That's what we call having a meditation practice. That's what the Thomas Keating called centering prayer. Centering prayer is not contemplation. It makes you ready for contemplation, and then the contemplation happens. All you can do is make yourself ready to get the barriers in between you, and then all of a sudden then that's it. You're just there, and then it happens. Even if you don't feel like anything's happening, it's happening because you said yes. You showed up. Last night, for instance, I'm adding a third kind of formal rendezvous before I go to bed at night, and it was cold and I was really tired. We're in Louisville all day and I was really tired, and I thought of blowing it off, but then I said, I can't even sit for a minute or two. I'm so tired. But I walked over here, I lit the candle, I stood at the altar just for a moment, bowed to all those people, my grandmother, Merton, and then blew the candle out and went back. It's not about the amount of time, you see, it's about showing up. That makes it sacred. I mean, those of you in the Catholic Church who were raised there and are even maybe still going to church, good for you. When you get the body and blood of Christ, it's not like it's symbolic. It has this potency. It means more than this thin little wafer. It doesn't have a lot of nutritional value, but that's the point. Same with a little sip of wine if you take it. It's the ritual of it and the symbolism of it that does feed you. Yeah, you would know about that because I used to think if they gave away Oreos, they'd have more people in the pews, and or ever in the 60s, after Vatican II, you'd have a loaf of whole wheat bread. If you're at some kind of free-thinking Catholic church, and at least there was a little bit more than the wafer, but that's missing the point. Last night, when I just stood there for a few breaths in the presence, showed up, and then blew the candle out, bowed to everybody, and walked back. That was just as good as, 5-day retreat. From the divine's point of view, I showed up, you see. So get all this measurement stuff out of the way. So make ready for the sacred, whose smile. This is a very interesting thing. When you really get into the deep traditions, it could be Buddhism, it could be Christianity, Hinduism. When you get into the deep tradition of contemplative in these things, there's this the sense of that the beloved, the great mystery, ultimate reality, whatever you want to call it, God, Allah, is smiling at you. There's the energy of that. You can't work with Thich Nhat Hanh for any amount of time before he talked about the smiling practice. And I heard him on tape talking about smiling practice and how you just bring a little faint Mona Lisa kind of smile just to your lips. That was that was his comeback when he's all over the place. And then all of a sudden, oh yeah. And so take a breath and a little smile on the lips. And then somebody said, well, isn't that a little phony? I mean, how isn't it a little phony to smile when you feel awful? And he said, yes, that's it's not phony. That's why we call it practice. I mean, if the sun comes out, you feel warmer. That's not practice. That's just cause and effect. But he said, no, that's why we call it practice. You see, yeah, and it's a saying, yes, yeah. So this idea that make ready for the sacred, whose smile like lightning. There's energy in this encounter. You see, the energy of the universe, lightning. Whose smile like lightning awakens the song of everlasting healing. To be a Buddhist is, when the Buddha had his experience and was first encountered by people, they said, what are you? Not who are you, but what are you? He had never seen anything like this in a human form. And he just said, I'm awake. And the same thing, Jesus is the other guy that I know of, human being, that people said, well, what are you? You're the Messiah, you're John the Baptist come back. These guys were radiating something, that light that they're holding in Sunita's picture, that light energy, that energy of the divine. They're radiating something. And you may have met people who have that kind of radiance. But these guys were so strong, they said, well, what are you? So I'm awake. I'm awake. And he said, he has all kinds of same images. Jesus was the poet, and he uses this images. Stay awake. Don't fall asleep. Light the candle. Stay awake. And so this, this lightning bolt that awakens the song of everlasting healing. So this is something deep, and I learned this from Ira Progoff, who was a depth psychologist who trained me in how to write the journal back in the 80s. And he said, your body is a self-healing mechanism. He says it's always working towards healing. And he said, you just have to find out to get rid of the blocks to it. And so, make ready for the sacred, whose smile like lightning awakens the song of everlasting healing that now sleeps in your paper flesh like dynamite. Yeah, it's an incredible image there. I'm so thankful for Merton to give it to me. The idea that healing is sleeping in us and it can awake. And when he calls us paper flesh, that's really an interesting image. It just, paper is sort of flimsy. And when you wake up in this way that Jesus and Buddha were talking about, when you wake up fully, the healing just flows. And healing is what we long for, this feeling of wholeness, the same it's the root is the same word. To be healed, it doesn't mean to live forever. It doesn't mean that your illness is gone. It could, maybe you got cancer and then you go through the therapy and it's gone. My one of my best friends, Mary Lucan, who died of cancer some years ago, um, she was healed into whatever was next because the cancer didn't go away, but in that kind of fiery encounter uh, with an illness, the healing was let loose. She wasn't cured. She was healed, though. She died a healed woman, and that's possible for all of us. Hey, no, none of us are gonna, we're never gonna get past this idea that we're gonna live forever. That's that's a kind of crazy notion. This body is not going to go on forever. See, but you can you can graduate to this next realm healed or more healed than we are now, and then who knows what happens in the next realm. The Tibetans say in that bardo that you're 7 times more charged up to be healed of various things than you are in life because you don't have a lot of distractions in the bardo. But they're saying the healing goes on if it needs to, and then if you need to come back, either as totally healed or to get some more healing, you go on to the next grade. Yeah, and yeah. So it's so lovely to say, make ready for the sacred, whose smile like lightning um, awakens the song of everlasting healing that now sleeps in your paper flesh like dynamite. And then, yes, I said yes. I said yes. You say yes to that whole deal. You know, you say yes to showing up. You showed up here. So you've done it. Some of you have showed up for more than 2 years, almost every time. That's something. The healing that's coming from that, you may not feel it yet. You may not even be aware of it. That's the one thing that was really helpful to me and puzzling when I was started working with Suzuki Roshi's teaching is he said, don't think you know what happens when you sit down on your little black cushion for 20 or 30 minutes. Don't think you know. He says, lots happening that you're not aware of at all. Healing is happening. Wholeness is happening because you're taking the time to show up just for that. Yeah, yes, I said yes, I said yes. Well, all right. That's the rendezvous. So that's enough for the teaching. So we'll segue now to just some formal silence of doing that.